Kingdom is that one manga that everyone's heard of but nobody has really read, at least here in the West. Well, I might be overplaying that a bit as a lot of people have read it, but nowhere near as many as I expected, and I find this to be a real shame. Hence this video, because it easily competes with some of the best out there, and as of making this video, it's absolutely my favourite manga of all time. The reason for its lack of massive popularity in the West is most likely down to the fact that there isn't any official translation. As you'd expect, there's a bunch of fan translations available online you could read, which I definitely don't do, guys, but in all seriousness though, if you want to support the series, you're going to have to pick up the Japanese volumes. But regardless of this, Kingdom surprisingly has a very dedicated and passionate fanbase in the West, and that's because at the end of the day, Kingdom is an absolutely brilliant journey. The purpose of this video is just to share with you guys what it is that makes me love Kingdom so much, and so I hope it will appeal to both people looking to get into the series and also people who already are fans, so we can share our love for it. Let's chat about Kingdom. When writing a story about the real world, a choice has to be made on how to approach it, right? Whether you're going to ground it in reality, make it completely fiction, or maybe find that somewhere in between, and that in between is where Kingdom lies. Kingdom takes place in a historical fiction setting, to be specific in the Warring States period of China, a time long ago where China was divided into multiple states and one king fought to unify them all. The story follows two young war orphans on their journey to become great military generals, and this type of setting, I'm a sucker for it, man. Anything with war and politics, for example Game of Thrones, inject that shit into my veins. The objectives of unifying China and becoming a great general might come across as simplistic or even cliche, but when complemented by political power struggles and complex battles, they blend beautifully. Arcs tend to alternate between real battles and diplomatic battles. These range from fending off assassins to joining in some steamy female harems, and no, this isn't me desperately trying to bring you in with fan service. Promise. The only thing I will say though is that for a manga about people getting their heads bashed in, it can get very dialogue heavy. It gives off that feeling of reading a light novel at times, but being a massive fanboy of Hunter x Hunter, I didn't mind it at all. In fact, I love that Hara really went deep into incredible detail when laying out the world of Kingdom, but no matter what you're focused on, he truly has this flawless way of storytelling to the point where you are drawn into every single chapter. It would be a crime to discuss Kingdom without talking about the battles. Now, I'm not versed in war, but when you read Kingdom, it does feel like a massive game of chess is being played out right in front of your eyes. Each battle has an insane amount of detail, but not just in the artwork. Hara seems to love drawing out the map and formations of the armies to put everything into scale for you. And that's the thing, these campaigns can reach hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And this is where I think it really stands out from other manga that have war arcs. Those wars that are on a worldwide or even planetary level, typically they still are heavily focused on individual battles, right? Which is great because you can build up a lot of characterization. However, it sacrifices that feeling that there's something bigger going on. Kingdom is focused on these large scale battles rather than the individual ones. That's not to say Shin doesn't shine or have a big influence on the battlefield, but he still can't single-handedly put the army on his back and carry them to a win. The outcome instead is usually decided by the generals, who will come out on top, those relying on strategy or those relying on instinct. And there is just something so incredibly gratifying about watching these immense battles between states. And as you've probably seen by the panels I've had up, the art is gorgeous, it shows the atmosphere perfectly. All I can say is I never thought that simply reading a manga could make me feel this damn excited. I can genuinely feel the adrenaline pumping around my fucking body as I read, and nothing compares. If there's one thing about Kingdom that gives me mixed feelings, it's without a doubt the characters. Shin himself, well, the best way I can describe him is as a shonen protagonist in a seinen series. He's hot-headed, childish, dumb as shit, and he does that thing where girls are interested in him and he's completely unaware of it somehow. So if you aren't a shonen fan, I can imagine you'd find this quite jarring, but I found his character started to grow on me more and more as the story developed. Although he never really drops his temper or stupidity, he does become increasingly mature and pretty inspiring inspiring at times. He reminds me a lot of Gon from Hunter x Hunter. But when I said I had mixed feelings about the characters, I didn't actually mean Shin, I meant the different characters. The problem is there are so damn many of them. The cast is so big it's genuinely impossible to remember everyone. Not to mention some of the translations start off with the original Chinese names and then swap to the Japanese given names halfway through, which was so confusing. You know, not that it wasn't hard enough trying to remember everyone in the first place. In spite of this though, I can say that almost every single one of them has been brought alive. I don't know how Hara has done it, but he's managed to give substance to a shitload of characters, which means everyone feels important. I end up rooting for a lot of people, even Shin's enemies sometimes, because he's not the only one with goals. He's not the only one fighting to protect his friends and family. There are no clear-cut heroes and villains in this story. War is messy, brutal and unforgiving, and Kingdom perfectly depicts its characters and their motives in this way. You will find that some characters are introduced as completely untouchable masterminds, only to be blown out the water by a new upcoming character, which may feel slightly gimmicky to some, but in essence it's the core of the story. It's survival of the fittest, and if you're an old fella who can't adapt, then you're going to find yourself getting destroyed by fresh talent. It's the rise of a new era, and seeing all these new young soldiers trying to make history is just super cool. Ironically, this manga about men going off to war also has some astoundingly well written female characters. First of all, there's a lot of diversity between them. They range anywhere from timid palace girls all the way to some of the strongest characters in the series. Now, why I love it is because it does not feel like Hara decided to write some good characters and slap a pair of tits on them and say, hey, this is a well written female character. No. The women of Kingdom are all dealing with their own personal problems, some of which focus on their gender or their role in society, but also other normal problems too. And it baffles me that out of all of the manga and anime I've gone through, some of the best written female characters are in a political war manga. I didn't expect it, but I'm so happy I found it. Typically in anime or manga, training arcs are a bit of a snooze fest. You know, like My Hero Academia, where you see a lot happening but nothing really happens at the same time. I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty boring. Now I get PTSD flashbacks every time I see a training arc come up, but Kingdom handles them so well. I'd actually argue it should be a staple for how to make a training arc enjoyable to read. As I said, most of the time you see a lot of training, but it's never really that satisfying. But Hara whips out this excellent Uno reverse card, where someone gets sent off for some vaguely explained training, then you switch and focus on another set of characters for a while. Now the reason I like this so much is because it feels like time passes. I know in the back of my head Shin is off training, while the world is still moving around him. And when he makes his return, something changes in his next battle, a tactic, technique or whatever else, you see his growth, and that's when it hits you with exactly how he trained to obtain this growth. It has to be one of my favourite ways to do training arcs in manga because there's none of that boring, drawn out BS you can get sometimes. But on this topic I want to talk about the way time skips are handled as well. The idea of using a bunch of small time skips rather than a couple giant ones feels so much more natural. I don't feel like I've missed out on anything too major, but I can still see and feel the change in the characters. I don't actually know how hard it is to draw characters getting progressively older, but Kingdom hits the nail on the head with it. I am obsessed with progression. If it was a drug, I would have a crippling addiction to it. Whether it's in games, TV shows or manga, I love it because it's fun. I like seeing people gain new gear or get a bigger castle, and with Kingdom literally everything has progression. The story, the battles, the people, even the art, which was already a spectacle at the start. With every new arc it somehow manages to one-up itself and become even bigger and better. It does kind of sound like I'm talking about some power scaling going on here, but I hope it never really comes to that. As of making this video, I am over 300 chapters deep into Kingdom, and I can safely say it's going to stay one of my all-time favourites. I wish it did have a little bit more recognition here in the West, but either way I really wanted to share my appreciation for this series with you guys, and I hope you found it useful or enjoyable. If you did like the video, maybe subscribe because it helps me out a ton, and as always, take care of yourself guys and take it easy. Peace!